the doors that we were knocking on and the people we were talking to, there was some fear there, and we didn't want to be fear-mongering, but yet, much like the bicycle trail signage, I would want to know. But we ran into problems right away. Some people didn't want to know because they felt that if they ever were to sell their property and they had knowledge that there was contamination on their property, then they would have to disclose that. We were getting phone calls from realtors. Do you know what you're doing to property values around here? You're killing us. Well, maybe it's not us that's killing you. It might be some other problems. It got thorny real fast. And at the meetings were loud. They were emotional. Oftentimes people were afraid. We were using language and terminology and concepts that required some learning curve time to get there. And so we might be speaking to people that may not have the time to or even the energy or inclination to go through that learning curve. And so to keep people's attention on the matter was a walking a tightrope at times, let alone all the moral and ethical and economic complexities that come up in matters like this. So it was exhilarating, it was exhausting. I don't regret any of the time spent in the work. I wish that we had been more successful in having landfill A removed, but I say we, as CAN, we felt like we at least forced GE to the table with EPD for an agreement that had parameters and a monitoring schedule, which they're still adhering to today. So we felt some success in that, and in that we had been of some service to the public as far as information goes.
So you're, yeah.
I've got to run.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
You bet. Good to see
Good
you.
to meet you, Paul.
Well,
See you
let's
again.
get together sometime and
Look
we
forward
can
to it.
extrapolate on this.
I look forward to it.
Bye.
Thanks for coming by.
We should definitely have a camera for that. So what you're talking about is just how complex this issue is, and just how many perspectives, can be used to examine it. What I'm curious about is, what else could GE do at this point? Does that make sense? Like, what else so they have to maintain that property, they have to make sure water is not continuing to disseminate the PCBs that are still concentrated on the property.
Right.
What else could they do for Rome? Because my thought process is they've denied Rome a lot of opportunities just by disposing of those materials in a relatively careless way.
Right. I know that there's some brownfield initiatives out there which attempt to put a positive aspect on things, and I don't think there's any reason to reinvent the wheel at GE. There's plenty of models out there for what could be. There's enough property going unused in a building there, it could be turned into something productive, I'm sure. Now, whether it's a full-blown manufacturing facility, whether it's a solar array, I don't know, but there's something to do there for the greater good of the community, I'm sure. And it wouldn't involve signing over the property to the city. GE could come back and make a better use of that property. Smarter people than me can figure that out.
I like the idea, though. Why couldn't you just cover that whole property with solar panels?
Sure.
I mean, because it's going to have to sit. You don't want people engaging it too much, but you could put solar panels and then.
You sure could. It could become an employer for the community. Besides feeding back in electrons back into the grid, it could become a significant employer.
Which would dovetail nicely with GE's origins here.
Right.
Ooh, that's a nice ending. That would be a really good ending for this film.
It would.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit more? Come on. What do you think? I mean, Have you thought about that, or was that just off the top of your head?
That just came right off the top of the head. We've been thinking about things like this in terms of Georgia Power and the future of Plant Hammond, because the future of Plant Hammond doesn't look so great. And so we anticipate, or some people in the community are anticipating, that we're going to lose the generation of electricity. That's secondary to the generation of tax revenue and jobs. So we've got to start thinking how we're going to replace that revenue from a tax base and jobs as well. GE was a strong and important, a viable, and a productive member of this community for many years. I won't deny that. Many friends of mine, relatives, my uncle worked his entire career there. He retired from there. He's still living with a great retirement. I worked there for, less than a year, but it was an important and valued member of the community. What they did was legal up until it wasn't. But there's a legacy there that would just be wonderful to bring it full circle back to another important contributing member of the community. And I think that I would hope that GE would be proud to be a part of that. And given the technical savvy that company has, they may have more to contribute than just property.
Okay, do you want to comment any more on that? Because I was going to change gears a tiny bit.
Change gears.
What's that?
That was good. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's good because because I don't know what the end of this movie is, but that might
Yeah.
be it.
Yeah.
How does GE,
Honestly.
be a, valuable member of the community and fix their image? Because a lot of people won't. There's serious cognitive dissonance. Like they don't want to think negatively of GE. They did so much for the community. People have a hard time. I gave my life to this company. That was and they felt like GE gave a lot to them.
They do. And
Yeah.
my conversations with my uncle during this time were pretty interesting. He was, you could see the concern in his eyes. He knew what happened there. He worked there for decades, but yet he raised his family on the paycheck that he got from there. High school education, had a wonderful career from it. So, and he's just one of many hundreds of people who made a good living there. So,
The other thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of the amount of fishing that goes on still. And should we have more fish advisories at the Lock and Dam currently? It's like they're promoting a lot of fishing, and there is no obvious caveats,
Right.
about what people might be ingesting.
yeah. Well, as a scientist, it's got to be data-based. So what we need is a blender and some fish and a mass spectrometer. And then we can see what the PCB levels are in the catfish and in the striped bass and in the white bass down there. But you can go and look at EPD's advisories as they stand right now. And I can't quote them chapter and verse, but I know, for instance, I like the hybrid. I like the striped bass. I like striped bass fishing, and that season's coming up pretty soon. But anything over 18 inches, throw it back. Don't eat it. It's old enough that it's bioaccumulated enough PCBs in its fatty tissue that you don't want to be eating that. So, I guess the question is, there's a legal question of what amount is safe to have in your body, and then there's the question of, personally, do I even want one molecule in my body? So I'm not sure how public entities bridge that gap. For sure you want to post the legal requirements or the EPD requirements, and do you just let people make their own inference after that, or not?
Well, what's interesting about that is it kind of goes against our, our conservation ethic, which is toss back the little ones and only take the big ones.
Yep. Yep.
That was good. So if we Because I think this would be a fun project, is for you literally to bring in the fish, throw them through a blender.
Yeah.
Do we have the abilities? Does Joe Vanelli have the ability?
She might.
Do we have the ability to test for
I don't know
PCB
if you
levels?
guys got a mass spec out there? No, we don't have one here.
All right, that's on your list. You're gonna amend your work plan
Yeah, yeah.
and see if we could actually do that, and that would be fun to film. Use that what he just said,
Yeah.
and then document the process and see if Joe Vanelli.
Well,
wanna
and
do the-
EPD may be doing that on a regular basis. I would suggest contacting EPD as quick as you can and see what their latest data is.
Okay.
Because if they would catch the fish and blend them up, that'd be a lot easier than us kids.
Do you want to take on that, contacting EPD and just seeing
Sure.
on the fish stuff, just because you've been
Yeah.
working with CRBI?
Yeah.
And that was the other thing, is Joe works as a bonner with CRBI, but what is I would love for you just to talk about you said it already, but again, reiterate your first interactions with CRBI and what was their role in this? Because we are going to
Oh,
have
yeah,
Joe
yeah,
and
great.
CRBI folks talk about how they've been putting pressure on
Sure.
GE to monitor.
My very first interaction with CRBI was in its early stages of formation when its founder, Jerry Brown, came to me probably in 1995 or 96. And I was working for the Boy Scouts of America at that time at Camp Sidney Dew, and he was interested in a partnership with the Boy Scouts of America. So we talked about that a lot, and that was a fun conversation. But CRBI grew quickly after that, and I only had peripheral knowledge of their activities up until the year 2000 and 2001, when the PCB and the stream drainage pattern issues came up, and the fate of these PCBs through all the waterways. So I turned and went immediately back to CRBI. At that time, they were a full-blown nonprofit with Mitch Lawson as their director. And so Mitch and I made fast friends.